Welcome to the Boston Art Podcast,
Boston's premier art podcast,
where we talk art, culture, and philosophy.
My name is Theodore Earthworms.
And I am Brian Huntress.
Welcome to the show.
It's recording now.
Okay. So we recently, I'm just going to start off right away.
You're talking shit? What are you talking shit about?
We've recently enabled a feature on our podcast where you can send us little comments on Spotify. It's like our Q&A feature, and I didn't really know what it was. It just kind of appeared there one day. It turns out Brian turned it on. But basically, people can send us feedback, and it's nested in our, like, insights or whatever. Like, we can see it, and other people can't see it. And someone left us feedback, which started out very nice. They were like, I just listened to this for the first time, thought it would be interesting. I forget what they said. They said something positive about the episode. And they ended it with, the bickering, not so much.
Just like, okay.
Like, what?
It kind of made me think, like, I was like, are we creating, like, because I could see, like, let me put it into perspective. I listened to the podcast, the H3 podcast. Uh-huh. The first time I ever listened to that show, I was like, this is horrible. These people are so weird. They're just talking shit about people and infinitely. Like, I just didn't understand the tone at all. And I thought they were just awful people. But then I returned to it, and I was like, oh, I get the tone and the vibe and the dynamic. And then I liked it. But at first, I was, like, appalled. And I kind of wonder if that person heard us, like, kind of arguing and just, you know, whatever, and, like, they didn't know that we do that all the time, and that it's, like, kind of banter. It's not like we're actually arguing, it's banter.
I didn't think critically about it at all. I just immediately was like...
You were like, fuck this person.
Like, what the fuck? You're gonna Yelp review my relationship right now? Are we for real?
Is the podcast your relationship, you think?
I mean, it's a fraction of it. I think the reason we bicker is because we're in a relationship. I don't talk like this to, like, my friends usually.
You don't think we would bicker if we had a podcast and we weren't in a relationship?
I don't think that we would have a podcast without being in a relationship.
How funny is that? Like, there's a lot of people who think, like, oh, you cannot, like, collaborate professionally or anything with the person you're dating. It just won't work. But the only reason we've ever been able to do that is because we're dating.
Yeah. We
only collab because we're in the same place all the time.
I don't like collaborating with very many other people, to be honest. I
think also podcast in my world would never work unless it was with you or it was alone. Like, I could keep doing this if it was just me interviewing people. That would be less fun, obviously, because I like doing this with you. But yeah. I don't think I could have, like, a homie or, like a satellite guest. It's actually maybe not. It would have to be really fucking streamlined for me to do that.
I think that so that makes sense. But I think that I actually could. Like, I think it would have to be somebody who I thought would be committed and would actually do it long term with me. But I think that I've had friends or people that I think are interesting who I would do a podcast with, but I don't think that it would be the same tone at all. Because it's kind of like I guess what it is when it's only two hosts is a really documented relationship, right? So it would be the tone of the tone of the podcast would be the tone of the friendship.
Well, a lot of people don't understand that when you start a show with somebody, even if you like them, you have to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of conversations with them.
Yeah. That are interesting and different every time.
So, like, maybe you have fun with your friend every once in a while, but can you have fun with that friend for, like, thousands of hours?
If it's someone who knows how to gab and has interesting insights on things, I think that the skill set isn't, do you know a ton of stuff that would be worth podcasting about, which is what a lot of people think that it is. It's, I mean, maybe this is a reflection on myself, because the first word that came to mind was argumentative, but are you able to riff the bit?
You gotta riff the bit.
Yeah.
Like a bit riffer. You gotta be a big bit riffer.
Yeah.
Bit riffer.
I'm feeling the urge to bicker with you right now.
Yeah, that's your whole thing.
That was something I wanted to bicker about just then.
Riffing.
But I've heard some feedback that that's a bad thing to do, so I'm gonna not bicker with you.
So you're gonna sacrifice the format to spite a random person that we'll never meet or see again.
Is it hostile compliance? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, you're a big hostile complier. Okay, so we got a subject today. You want to do do you want to do a topic or do you want to not?
A topic? You mean a script?
Yeah, like a script. You want to do the script or not? What do you think?
I want to do the script.
Let's fucking.
I mean, I don't know what the script is, so I can't really.
I think you'll be excited.
What if you tell me the title and I'm like, meh?
The title is Mental Illness, Street Fights, and Hiding a Dead Body.
Didn't you say you were going to do less triggering episodes?
This one I don't think you'll find very triggering.
Very?
It's Francis Bacon.
Oh! You know, I actually know very little about Francis Bacon, so I'm excited for this.
Francis Bacon is a very, very... Let's say this. Okay, trigger warning at the top. We are going to discuss violence in the form of fights and blood and punching. We are going to explore
TW punching.
a little bit of like essay kind of stuff and assault. There is a little bit of that, unfortunately, but we're gonna try to handle that gracefully and hopefully no one will feel bad about it. But it's not a huge part of the story at any rate.
Okay.
So anyway,
I'm excited for this because I know there have been other episodes where I've said I don't really know anything about the person. But it was more that I knew, like, very little, not that I knew nothing. But Francis Bacon, I think I know that he is maybe an expressionist painter?
he would be considered an expressionist painter, yeah.
That's all I know. And the only reason I know that is because I know people who cite him as a inspiration. Like you, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's like, you know, one of those, when you're like a weird emo art student, your professor will always be like, oh, you'd really love Francis Bacon. And then you're like, who's that? And then you, whatever, anyway. He's similar, in the similar camp as like Frida Kahlo, Basquiat, like artists that are loved widely by generation after generation of young artists.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Egon Schiele is another one. Versus there's a lot of artists who I would say are probably not liked by young people and only liked by old people. Like Rothko. Klimt?
Rothko.
You think Klimt is only for older folks? You know, Klimt is a mom's artist.
Yeah.
Moms like Klimt.
Yeah.
Yeah, like middle-aged women, middle-aged romantic women. Not to be weird, because I know that there is...
MILFs like Klimt.
Well, I mean, I just think I honestly think that's true.
I agree.
Because there are a lot of, like, very feminine... They're feminine erotic paintings, but in a tasteful way. They're not pornographic or raunchy. They're just beautiful love paintings with gold and shimmering colors and...
Yeah.
You know, I think that they're, like... I think they definitely would lend themselves to maybe... You know, that sensibility. Anyway, whatever. Fuck it. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So, another script. Time for me to get weird and awkward and think that I'm doing a bad job the whole time.
You're doing a great job.
Hopefully the audio quality isn't horrible.
Should we do a quick check? Since we only recorded a little.
Okay. All right. I just checked, and it's not great, but it's not terrible. It's definitely on par with the usual iPhone quality that we have. I suggest just try not to yell or we'll massively clip.
Okay.
There's a lot of room sounds because we're using a real microphone because whatever. Anyway.
And we're not in the car.
Yeah, it sounds like we're recording into an SM58.
I don't know what that means. Do you think that it's
it's okay.
helpful for us to record in the car because it's confined space? Do you think that's why we get away with the iPhone mics?
Yeah, that helps because... Yeah, recording, like, I remember Talk Art, our ops, just kidding, the podcast that we cloned in creating this one, they recorded an episode in a gallery one time, interviewing a curator or something, and no offense to them, it was the most unlistenable thing, because it was like they were recording inside of, like, a cathedral of reverb.
Yeah.
Like, it was just, like... We probably have had one or two episodes that are like that.
Oh, we've had many like that.
Have we had a reverb episode?
Ooh, that's a good question.
That was just absolutely disastrous reverb.
You know what we've done that is just, like, embarrassing is something that we've gotten better at not doing now is just allowing horrible background noise to happen because we're too shy to ask someone to turn off a radio or a fan.
Oh my god, that is such an embarrassing episode. I wish I could...
There's multiple.
If the worst... Huh? What?
I was trying to melt the two.
The worst one that we did that was like that, I would delete, honestly, if it wasn't...
So good.
Yeah, like, it was just too... The circumstances were too... Anyway,
well, there's another one, too, where there was a radio on in the background the whole time.
I think that was the same one.
No, I know which one you're thinking
radio?
of.
Who had a radio?
No, it was just music.
Was that the episode we recorded with Martina? That had the jazz music playing?
Oh, no, I didn't even know about that.
That was a jazz music episode, too.
It was at Walter's.
Oh, right.
We were too shy to ask.
I bet if we looked on YouTube, we'd see that it was copyright claimed. Okay, we're going to start because we don't have an infinite time.
Okay.
Okay. A lot of people talk... Okay, so Francis Bacon. Welcome, everybody. A lot of people talk about the tortured artist archetype. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it hurting aspiring artists? Who knows? Today we're going to talk about one of the most famous tortured artists of all time, a victim of horrific abuse, who subjected himself to extreme abuse, and whose work is characterized by its depiction of death, misery, disturbing sexual scenes. The title of today's episode, Mental Illness, Street Fights, and Hiding a Dead Body, The Life of Francis Bacon. Do you like my narration voice?
Yeah, that's a good intro.
Cool. Okay, Francis Bacon, born in Ireland in 1909, so he's pretty fucking old, is one of the most complicated and strange figures to emerge out of the British art world. He was born in Ireland, but they immigrated to England very soon after.
I have a question that might be a spoiler.
Okay.
Did he die recently?
He died at an appropriate time.
Okay.
Okay, Francis Bacon, born in Ireland, one of the most complicated figures to come out of the British art world. Known for his disturbing paintings, Francis was a self-taught painter who painted scenes from his own life, people he knew, or allegoric narrative depictions of scenes from his own life. Like many parents in 1909, Francis's mother and father were not very kind. His father was a military man who bred and trained racehorses on a farm. Both his mother and father were sternly, severely religious, and Francis faced a future of hell and abuse as his love for art and his sexuality emerged.
What religion?
I think they were Protestant. They were Christian. They weren't Catholic. They had to be Protestant. It's possible that I'm wrong about that, but Christian to say the least. Okay, what was I going to say? So, Francis also suffered from chronic asthma that left him unable to play with the other kids, unable to roughhouse, and kept him out of the blue-collar work environments that his father cultivated on their farm. Dust kicked up by horses or dust in the workshop would send Francis into coughing fits. And it was at this farm that Francis would experience extreme abuse, neglect, and permanent trauma that he would carry with him for the rest of his life. If only he had known then that in just a few decades he would become one of the most well-known and important artists in the UK. Francis at mid-career, we're jumping around the timeline a little bit. Francis at mid-career was not well-loved, but he was well-known. In post-war England after World War II, so we're talking 1940s, regular people did not want to see dark, gory, weird shit. People wanted hope and excitement and joy. You know, it's kind of like an anti-Victorian vibe in England. Everyone just wanted something hopeful, some American, well, not American, but some nuclear family happiness. Was, people were kind of hungry for. After the death and carnage of World War II, many conservative audience turned their backs on the likes of Francis Bacon, yet he still painted. He had some opportunities early on, but his true heyday was yet to come. For now, Francis was a regular in London's Soho district, a city, a part of Westminster, where we visited. We went to Soho.
I was going to say, we went there.
We're going to learn a lot about Soho right now. Today, Soho is a hyper-affluent strip of clubs and restaurants in England, but at the time, it was not that. Anywho, during his lifetime, there was an array of new clubs and that sold affordable drinks in Soho. Like really, kind of it was littered with dives and fun clubs to go to. One of which was the Gargoyle, the other was the Colony Room. This area was almost all young people, and it was a great place to drink and gamble and to find someone to go home with. One UK journalist writes, there was no worry of pensions in Soho. People didn't live long enough to get them. Today, Soho, like I said, is a hyper-affluent part of Westminster that's filled with fancy restaurants and galleries and theaters and shit like that. But back then, it was seedy, dangerous, and bohemian, much like New York City Soho. Regardless, in London, it is remembered today as being home to a legendary 20th century club scene.
Sounds fun.
It probably was back then. I mean, we went there. I think it was around where, like, the Chinatown was and all the theaters were, and we walked around there at night a bunch.
There were some clubs, but we didn't go into them.
Yeah.
I think the night that we were walking around, it was really late already, and we had something to do in the morning, so we were only there for a bit.
We did. There was gay clubs everywhere and bars and... Yeah, I remember. That was Soho, right?
Yeah, I remember thinking it looked really fun, but we just didn't have the time to stay.
Well, we're also not really bar club people, so it wasn't really our vibe.
Yeah. I would have
Maybe
popped in if
me.
we weren't doing anything in the morning, but I think that was the night that we had to do something the next day. Like, early.
Yeah. I think I remember what it was. Oh, no, it wasn't that. We were probably going to the Tower of London or something to see where poor Anne Boleyn was beheaded or something.
Jesus.
We did a lot of fun tourist stuff. Boring historical tourism. That's the best stuff. Anyway. Frances was very good friends with the owner of the Colony Room and would party with her regularly. Club goers say Frances was charismatic, exciting, and charmed anyone he talked to. So, yeah. His friend Maggie Hambling says the same thing. Frances maintained a regular tab at the Colony Room and brought his friends there regularly. Friend Nadine Haim says... I'm the last of his female friends still alive, she says. He loved to go with me to drink. He never made me collapse drunk. Francis and Muriel made people drink. Like prostitutes, they made people drink up champagne. It was a game. That was translated from French, but that woman was basically saying that, because she only speaks French in the interviews with her, but she was saying that everybody that Francis and the club owner would drink with, because so Francis was best friends with the owner of this club.
Yeah.
Would bring everybody there, and they would make people drink and party with them.
Yeah.
And force everybody to just get absolutely fucking obliterated. And this woman is saying, Francis was so nice to me. He didn't force me to get obliterated with him. He just drank regular style.
Well, that's good.
So Francis is in his early 30s, a big drinker in Soho, gay clubs, and he is a degenerate.
All right.
In a good way. I don't say that in a disparaging way. In the kind of fun club guy, whatever. During this time, Francis lived in a little apartment in South Kensington with his childhood nanny, a woman named Jessie Lightfoot.
They stayed... Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, his nanny. So he moved out of his home and took his nanny with him, which is kind of a little bit weird. Anyway, she was a sweet woman who took care of things like cleaning, cooking, and keeping everything in order, all the while serving Francis and his friends cigarettes and alcohol. Francis spent his time outside of the studio gambling, drinking, and having illegal card games in his house.
Did he pay her? Was she, like, still a nanny?
Yeah, so the thing with Francis is, we're going to get into it, but he maintained so he grew up extremely affluent, and I'm not sure if he inherited any of the money from his parents or if they paid him anything, but he definitely, through different jobs, maintained that affluence, such as having a London house and having help, essentially, which was, and he made money through gambling as well, because he had like a roulette wheel or some shit installed in his fucking house and had and did illegal gambling in his home as well. So
okay,
he's a hustler. He's making money. Anyway, through all of the chaos, this was the age of existentialism and nihilism for Francis and his friends. Bacon says, we do with our life what we can do. We do with our life what we can, and then we die. What else can you do? What else is there? And if somebody is very aware of that, perhaps it comes out in their work. A prolific gambler, Bacon was very interested in risk and chance. He says, if anything ever does work in my case, chance and I call... fuck. If anything does work out in my case, chance and what I call accident takes over. So he's a gambler. He believes in just fucking letting it rip and letting the pieces fall where they may. So Bacon.
This seems like a terrible person to tell like an art school freshman about.
Oh,
so
yeah.
far, really bad.
Well, he's famous because he just made fucking sick, dope-ass, weird paintings.
Yeah.
And he was gay, and he fucking got drunk every day and gambled. That's a very romanticized type of person.
It's true.
You know?
I didn't catch that he was gay. That's cool.
Oh, he's one of the gayest people that ever lived.
Did you say that already?
I might not have, but I just actually assumed that you knew he was gay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he's... Yeah.
Cool.
We'll get into it. There's a long list of insane romantic engagements in the story that we'll learn a lot about. Anyway, Bacon characterizes his painting process this way. He tries to paint... in the terms of gambling and stuff. He tries to paint one thing and then moves onto a new idea right in the middle if it fails. If that part doesn't really work out, he moves on to a new idea. He does this, edits and changes on the same canvas, giving the work a very heavily painted, expressive, and surreal feeling. Describing one painting, Francis says, I tried to do a painting of a gorilla in a cornfield. Then I tried to do a bird alighting. And then gradually, all the marks I made suggest this other image, which is a totally accidental image. I'd never thought of doing an image like this in my entire life. And that painting is called, I believe it's called Umbrella in the Sides of Beef. And when you look at it, it looks like a meat umbrella of some kind.
And it was originally a gorilla in a cornfield?
Yeah, and a bird.
The thing that's really funny about that is that the original starting point is also really strange.
Yeah, gorilla in a cornfield. When has that ever happened? I mean, there must be. Maybe, I'm sure.
Why did he paint that?
They probably paint... I mean...
I kind of wish that painting existed.
I don't know about anything about agriculture in Africa or any parts of the world with gorillas, but do they have, like, giant cornfields and shit?
Where gorillas live?
Yeah. Am I sounding stupid right now?
I have no fucking idea. I would be surprised if that was a scene that... Like, I don't think gorillas, like, run in and steal corn.
Yeah, like, how many gorillas in the fucking history of the world have just been chilling in a cornfield?
To be fair, I don't have a lot of experiences with cornfields either.
Or gorillas.
So I'm picturing, like, Tarzan and, like, Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, like in the poppy field?
Well, I was thinking the cornfield.
Right, of course.
That's a pretty good scene, though.
Okay, where were we? Okay. Damien Hirst, another very controversial and well-known British painter, studied Bacon in art school, remarks on the terrifying nature of some of his paintings. Between images of discarded flesh and beef cuts, there would be some kind of central awful figure, usually a face obscured by darkness, looking back at the viewer. So, similar to Hyman Bloom and other painters of this era, Francis painted like meat cuts.
Yeah.
You know, like flesh, or like, you know, or what looked like flesh.
What year are we in right now, roughly?
We're in like the 40s.
40s?
30s. Francis's career went from like, he was born in 1909, so probably like the 40s and 50s all the way to the 80s, maybe.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're like right in the middle of the 20th century. A real like lost generation, silent generation, like your great grandparents. This guy's our great grandparents' age. Anyway. Okay. Damien's own work is heavily inspired. Damien Hirst's own work is heavily inspired by Francis's, as he studied him heavily while in school, and even saw him hanging around Soho, eating at restaurants and hanging out at bars when Damien was younger. The two never spoke, as young Damien felt like it would have been too weird or awkward to approach him. But apparently he saw him often, the famous painter.
That's interesting.
Yeah. People
He should have.
I know. Well, I mean, it didn't really hurt him that he didn't, because he is probably the most famous, probably in the top 10 most famous living British painters.
That's true.
So.
But imagine if they had.
Yeah, who knows what could have been interesting, because, you know, I mean, I don't know if I included this later in the script, but Damien cites a lot of his influences from Francis Bacon, such as like his Shark Tank things, the flesh, the rotting shark flesh.
Yeah.
He attributes as being inspired by yeah, anyway. Okay.
That's really interesting.
Blah, blah, blah. Going back in time a little bit, we have a quote from Francis. I was born in Ireland, he says, and I was born a rabid Protestant. with
there you go.
with no beliefs, of course, is what he says. So yes, he was a Protestant. Now that we've got a little bit of background and context on kind of what his life was like as an established artist living in London, let's get back into some biographic details to understand what made Francis so fucked up. Be warned, also, the rest of the story gets a bit dark and discusses sex, violence, drugs, and suicide. Bacon describes his childhood as being a block of ice within. He says that he was never able to play with other children because of his asthma. He never successfully socialized either. His father, Captain Anthony Edward Mortimer Bacon, a military man and Protestant, trained racehorses on their property. Any dust, dirt, or whatever put young Francis in a coughing fit.
Oh.
Growing up on a farm, this was not ideal. This wasn't a normal. This was not ideal. This wasn't a normal rural farm. This was a high-class, posh farm. Francis and his 4 siblings grew up in luxury, comfort, because his father was such a successful military man and of good British pedigree from knights and lords and famous writer. His mother, Christina Winifred Firth, a former flapper girl, was the heiress to a steel and coal mill mine fortune. Safe to say, Francis didn't want for food, shelter, or anything, but he did want for love, safety, and a break from his regular beatings. Wow. So, a classic case of early 20th century growing up in significant affluence, but in in Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment.
Yeah.
You know.
That's awful.
It is so, there's so many stories from that era where people were like, oh yeah, I had me and all my siblings had our own personal servants, but our parents cut the webs of our fingers with razor blades every day. Or something, you know what I mean? Just egregious behavior.
Dark family dynamics.
Anywho, I can only imagine that Francis's father didn't approve of him from the beginning with his asthma and disinterest in manly things. As mentioned before, his coughing fits kept him away from hard labor in the dust of the barns. Plus, he was allergic to dogs and horses. Uh-huh. So,
Not a good person to be on a farm.
Right, especially a farm ran by his, militant fascist father who only does horse stuff.
Yeah.
So.
That sucks.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, I had a professor years ago that talked all about how Francis Bacon had this knack to capture the scream. My professor would go on and on about that, how the paintings were always screaming and how that was so cool. As many of his paintings feature an open mouth that appears to be screaming. It turns out this is actually not the case. According to biographers and art historians of Bacon's, they say that open mouth figures are actually gasping for breath. They're figures that can't breathe, that are desperately trying to breathe. Very creepy.
That's sad. That must have been a sort of fear of his. It makes sense with untreated and constantly triggered asthma to be afraid of not being able to catch your breath. Yeah,
you can say that again. Francis's upbringing was difficult with his scary, angry, religious father. This was not helped at all by the fact that Francis was gay. His father was deeply disappointed in him for many reasons, and Francis was often in trouble. This led to cruel and bizarre punishments, such as forcing the stable boys to whip Francis. This caused Francis to have a horrible, fucked up perspective on his sexuality. He's quoted as saying these abusive events led him to having a masochistic lifestyle and perspective and gave him a terrible psychosexual relationship with his father. So he would get in trouble and he would strip him and make the other guys whip him. So fucking totally weirdo fucking behavior.
Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah, stuff that would put you in prison or should put you in prison to do to another person.
Yeah.
Safe to say, Francis was horribly abused and permanently traumatized by his dad. Weirdly, Francis says that despite these punishments and the homophobic environment, he ended up having multiple secret sexual relationships with some of the grooms of which that were employed by his father. As depicted in one of his most famous works, a piece called Buggering in the Barn, which is a painting of 2 men having sex among haystacks in a barn. So, they say Francis's father discovered these clandestine sexual affairs and ordered Francis out of the house, kicked out at the age of 16, sending him away to live with an older man his father hoped could mentor him and whip him into shape.
Just a little kid.
Really, yeah. So, but...
Who was the older man?
We'll talk about that.
Oh.
My mother, he says, my mother and father were disgusted with me. So my father offered me to his friend, and his friend fell in love with me and took me to Berlin. I went to Berlin when I was 17. So after Berlin, I was completely corrupted. Is that an annoying sound I was making?
I just didn't like the
I was itching my sock, sorry.
It's okay.
So yeah, basically, this guy that Francis's dad sends him away with to like make him into a real man is secretly gay and starts to have an inappropriate sexual relationship with Francis and living with him in Berlin, Germany.
Great.
Yeah, so this
Awesome. He just Lolita'd his son, basically.
He Lolita'd his own child, yes.
Great.
Pretty much.
Such an improvement over his
Yeah, big
existing
improvement.
That's awful.
So, yeah, it's awful, but Francis, forever the optimist, felt like this was actually hugely liberating for him because at the time, Berlin, I'm sure it still is, but Berlin was known at the time as being like a city of sin filled with clubs and sex and drugs and fun and violence, and Francis absolutely fucking thrived. He loved
It's probably way better than where he came from.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Because you gotta think, you know, he's gay, and he's coming into his sexuality as a young teen and exploring, and he's, you know, and he starts to find other kids that are secretly gay or whatever, you know, like every person growing up does in that situation. But he's being beaten constantly, too.
Yeah.
In, like, totally freaky-ass fucked up ways. So, naturally, this would end up turning into, you know, now he's seeking out that exact vibe.
Yeah.
But on his own terms. So, and you might be wondering, this far in the story, you and the listener, really, why is Francis's story so fucking heavily littered with sexual information? The reason for that is Francis, we'll get into this later, did hours and hours and hours and hours of audio and video interviews with varying a variety of journalists where he talked openly and like grotesquely detailed with all this information. Like all of this is from Francis's own public speaking.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he said worse than what I included so far.
I think there's a sort of power in being able to name what you've experienced, though. That makes sense.
I suppose so, yeah. So, despite it being a reprieve to get away from his father and escape the abuse into a more accepting environment, Francis still felt rejected and hurt by his father exiling him, obviously. They say Francis going to Berlin changed him forever. Berlin at the time, as I said, was a very gay city filled with art, you know, and it was exciting, and there was freedom from persecution for these types. You know, they say Berlin was filled with BDSM clubs and gay bars and all manner of sexual curiosities. So teenage Bacon... Oh, also, after arriving there, this is actually more fucked up. I lost my place. Francis is... what would you even call him? You know, weird adult boyfriend abandoned him in Berlin, actually.
Oh my god.
They'd, like, broke up, or he just kind of left him there. And left Francis to fend for himself.
Did he have any money or anything?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, really. I think he must have been staying with someone or doing... It isn't really a well-documented part of his life, but apparently it was, like, whatever.
Wow.
And yeah, so he continued living there, though Francis took his first trip out of there on his own to Paris in 1928, where he absolutely fell in love with the art scene and the atmosphere. Francis saw Paris as the Olympus of the art world. He was fluent in French. He was he was fluent in French, and so he regularly traveled to France for the rest of his life. In fact, he adored Paris.
Wow.
I stayed for a short time in Paris, and it was about that time at Rosensburg I saw an exhibition of Picasso, and I think at that moment I thought, well, I will try and paint too. So he wasn't really an artist at the time.
Yeah.
He had a lot of aesthetic sensibilities, but yeah, it wasn't until he saw a gallery show of Picasso's, which is pretty fucking crazy to say, because Picasso is only ever seen in museums and extremely highbrow institutions. So for him to be in like a regular space is pretty interesting considering the time. After returning to London, Francis worked many odd jobs. He worked as a servant, a switchboard operator, and more before he finally found steady, legitimate work as an interior designer.
That's cool.
And he was able to support himself that way, getting enough to live his life and pay his own way before trying his hand at making art in the mid-30s. Little survives of the first 15 to 20 years of Bacon's career, with as little as one painting per year being documented and existing. There's even an 8-year period where they have 0 works accounted for. So I don't really know why. So historians have found definitive proof that was that he was prolifically creating during these times. So it's a mystery where these works ended up.
Huh. That's a shame. It could be a testament to the fact that he was traveling a lot and stuff at the time, though. Because when he saw that Picasso show, if it was
1928,
he would have been 19.
Yeah, he's a young guy. Sorry, we're in a household with other people and they're screaming, so it might come through on the recording.
Not screaming, but...
Yeah, just death screams. That's where we're living. Anyway, so the recording definitely heard that door slam. You know what's funny about that door slam? Because I've been in this room recording for so long.
Yeah.
I have songs on albums that accidentally feature that exact sound.
Really?
Of the door closing, yeah.
That's so funny.
There's multiple times where that's been accidentally put on a record.
We're in Brian's childhood bedroom.
Oh, please, don't put it like that.
Our bedroom.
My bachelor pad.
Excuse me.
Oh, it's not.
Well, I live here.
I said the wrong word. I mean, I don't know what it's called. I forgot what that meant. Okay, anyway. Okay, blah, 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 blah. So we're kind of in a fun fact part. All through the 30s, Francis worked mostly on his furniture designs, which is kind of interesting, going as far as having as a very own gallery show of all chairs, couches, and mirrors.
Wow, that's cool.
And they're all, like, very mid-century modern. Like, they're the type of shit you'd see, like, you know, like, old, like, really, like, ornate brown furniture, wood furniture.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of odd that he had that era. Eventually, he stopped doing that to take painting more seriously. By this time, he knew what he wanted, to be one of the greatest painters that ever lived.
But wait, so was he making his own furniture?
Yeah, he's fucking literally making furniture out of wood and upholstery.
By hand?
I guess. He must have had a shop.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like a kind of skimmed over detail, it feels like. Because that would take a lot to set up.
Yeah, I've actually saw online there is some pieces floating around or furniture that he made that still exists, but it's a pretty not a lot of people are very interested in that portion of his career.
It was pretty common for the time too, right? Mid-century modern. This is the mid-century.
I suppose so, yeah. And I think that he just kind of like, I think a lot of people see this era, if they even know that he ever was an interior designer and furniture maker. I think I have my facts right on that also. I mean, you're listening to a podcast, so fact check everything. Not all podcasts are just real information. Some of them are just people guessing.
Idiot.
Like us. So, you know, fuck off. Anyway. So, I think that most people just don't really care about. That's not exactly.
That's kind of cool.
Because
he's in his 20s right now, right?
Yeah.
So I just find it really fascinating that he just randomly took up furniture making. Like, before the internet, like, before tutorials, like, he just fucking did that?
I fucking guess so. I truly, you know, it's like, was kind of difficult to find really concrete information on this time. But that's what I found. I don't know.
I believe you.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so... Francis has quit his stupid fucking job making and doing that, and now he's at a point in his life where he's like, you know what? I'm gonna be a fucking artist.
Nice.
I'm done with this whack shit. I'm done. I'm gonna be the best. I'm gonna be the very best. Da, 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 da. Isn't that the Pokemon song?
I don't know.
Anyway, okay.
I wasn't allowed to watch Pokemon because my mom thought it was fucked up that they put the animals in little balls.
Wow. Damn. I guess it is. I mean, I've always wondered that. They shrink, right? Through some kind of magic or science, it shrinks the Pokemon, so they're not so they're safe and comfy in there.
You're asking me?
I don't fucking know. Never mind. I've never watched it either. I don't know shit about Pokemon. I've never even had the cards.
I played Pokemon Go And I played Pokemon X and Y.
I did a little bit of that, but I was really just jumping on the bandwagon. I didn't give a shit about Pokemon.
Yeah, definitely same. But it was fun.
Okay, so Francis's first significant leap forward toward his iconic style was a piece titled Crucifixion, which to me, yeah, I don't know, Crucifixion, which to me looks like an X-ray of a plucked chicken being crucified.
Okay.
This piece really rubbed people the wrong way and made the fine art audiences of London very uneasy. Despite the lukewarm response, he pushed forward. This is a famous piece, actually, because it's one of his first major gallery displays, and it is also currently owned by Damien Hirst, of all people. So,
I wish that
lucky guy.
I wish that I had a mental image of this piece. Should I look it up as you're talking about it?
You could look it up if you wanted, but it's monochromatic, and it literally looks like a chicken that is nailed to a cross.
Weird.
Like by accident. Like I'll pull it. Well, do you have your phone? Feel free to pull up some images of the artwork.
I didn't know if I
I believe you'll be looking for Crucifixion, Francis Bacon. Let me know if you see it.
1933 or 1965?
33 probably.
Great.
You got it?
Oh, yeah, it totally does.
Let me look.
Like that. He was.
Yeah, it literally just looks like a chicken.
Yeah.
Like a big slab of like chicken breast.
It's a really creepy image, but I like it.
Yeah, can I put my legs on top of your legs? Because they hurt. Is this hurting your legs?
It doesn't hurt my legs as long as you don't, like, dig in with your little bones.
Stick my bones into your bones?
Yeah.
I'll try not to.
Flesh on flesh, no bone in flesh.
Okay, now get off your phone so you can listen.
Okay.
People that listen probably think I'm such an asshole. I'm like, get off your phone. Stop looking at your phone.
I think that people think that I'm an asshole.
No, they love you. They love that. They love that about you.
What about the bickering? That's definitely me.
That was definitely somebody that just had never listened to the show before and didn't understand the vibe.
I don't understand how you don't understand the vibe.
So I think that we give off the branding that it's gonna be like listening to Radiolab or something if you click on this, but then they click on it and it's actually just like, I can't even think of like an example of another podcast.
I just don't understand the thought process.
We're like Tana Mojo and Jeff Wittick.
I don't know who that is. What is that? It's
like they're the most stereotypical influencers ever with a podcast, and they're like toxic, like funny people.
Would you comment on their podcast and tell them to stop bickering?
I think I might have said this previously, but I'm not a commenter. I don't like commenting on things. I think it's cringe.
It is.
I don't comment.
Well, no. I don't think that.
Please comment on everything that we do.
I like when people comment. I just thought that was insane. Like, can you imagine commenting on anybody's post about anything and be like, don't talk to your friend that way? I don't like it.
Yeah, that would be pretty weird. It's okay, though.
No.
Okay. I love how much you fucking hone in when somebody says something bad about us. You, like, will not let go of it. It's funny.
I was thinking about it today. I was like, damn, what the fuck? No, it's okay. Honestly, I'm just, like, I think it's funny, but I just, like... It's not even that the content of the comment was bad. It's, like, fine. Like, I don't really care. And I appreciate the feedback either way. It's just... I just find it so funny to comment that. Like, what do you want me to do? Stop? Like, just reassess my dynamic?
Like, shit, man, I need to, like, go to counseling and do some journaling and really soul search and figure out what's wrong with me.
Oh, my God. Anyway.
Shout out to that person. Thanks for listening. Okay.
They're definitely not listening anymore after my cold open.
Yeah. Okay. Returning back to 1945, we see the developed, mature version of Francis's vision in the Le gallery show featuring the famous...
Excuse me?
Le Frevere. I don't know how to fuck... It's a fucking...
Can I see?
Lefevre.
Lef...
Lefevre. Anyway, the Lefevre gallery show featuring the famous three figures painting, to no one's surprise. So this is a very famous piece by Francis Bacon. It's one of the main ones that show up if you Google him. It's another kind of... It's like a religious triptych, but once again, it looks like some kind of a flesh painting from another dimension where it's like not even a real thing that you can really conceptualize, but it just looks like a dead flesh chicken.
Cool.
And it's a triptych, and he displayed it at a major real commercial gallery, and everybody fucking hated it and thought it was really freaky. Because remember back to the earlier part of the episode when we were saying this was a very conservative time for the fine art vibes.
Yeah.
It's post-war. And, just like every other era ever of contemporary art now and into the future, it's mostly dominated by hyper-affluent tastemakers. So when people often talk about art history, and they say, and the art world hated it, what they mean is the hyper-affluent people that owned galleries and collected work and funded these places did not like it. Doesn't mean the regular people around didn't like it. It means that the term
art world doesn't usually refer to regular people.
It's usually referring to the greater financial engine that powers the art world. And I don't know. I'm not even necessarily. I'm not like talking shit. I'm like whatever. I'm not really like condemning that. I'm just kind of clinically characterizing it. Really, yeah. It is what it is.
It's interesting that that's the term that's used too, because I feel like when it comes to like film, people say Hollywood or the film industry or something, and it's very clear in the language that they're talking about, like, not talking about consumers. Yeah. If you're like, the film industry didn't like it, that doesn't mean that it did poorly in the box office. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's such a funny thing. Like, they say, like, there's a term for it that I forget, but it's when a director dies because of a flop. Like, they just permanently don't get hired anymore.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is directors don't usually make movies. Like, producers connect a team of people to create a movie, and directors are hired guns, essentially. Really big name ones like Scorsese or whatever, like those guys make the movie, but ones that are not as popular have to be approved. Like, they have to be known, and they have to have good relationships with people, and they have to have a good reputation. So if they tank one movie, it's like it's like, peace out, dude, you're cursed.
But the thing is,
it doesn't matter if their movies are well loved or not. They had one flop, they're gone. So it's like kind of like, the industry hated them, but the people are indifferent.
Yeah.
Or the people don't even know that the industry doesn't like this person. They're just like, oh, I haven't heard of them. I don't know.
Yeah. I find it so interesting, though, that the language around those industry terms there's such a clear distinction between the audience and the people within the industry that are funding the projects or have different roles in the projects, where the art world is not like that. A lot of people might think it's like the artist and then their audience, but that's not how it works.
Right, because there are a lot of unsung heroes in the art world, contemporary and past, where, a famous artist is usually as we learned from past episodes, such as the Andy Warhol one, an artist's career and success is usually made up by like 20 people that are working tirelessly to prop this person up and to build their career with them, and they usually are forgotten or not really credited, and in many cases not even compensated financially at all. Anyway, so fortunately we're taking a break from that kind of vampiric, evil, blood-sucking and using people vibe for this script, because Francis Bacon wasn't really like that. He wasn't really the type to just consume and kill people for their money and clout. Like, what I mean? He was more of just a regular. He was more, his chaos was focused inward. Anyway,
respectably so.
Respectably so. The type of chaos we can respect. Okay, so blah 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 blah. Okay, so. Shit. Okay, so this show that we were talking about, Le Favre Gallery, everyone hated the painting. It featured this triptych. What are you looking at the time?
I just want to make sure we're still recording.
Oh, yeah, we're good. It featured this triptych that is mentioned at the beginning segment of almost every single Francis Bacon documentary I could find.
Oh, wow.
Every Francis Bacon documentary opens with, and we start on the triptych. Like, everybody wants to talk about this fucking triptych. You should look this one up too. I'll tell you the name of it.
Okay.
Just so you can have context, because this is like the most important thing he ever made or something. It's called 3 Studies for Figures at the Base of a Crucifixion. It's basically considered the painting that made him a real figure in the fine art world.
What the fuck?
Let me see.
This one? The orange one?
Yep, it's a triptych. So that painting made him relevant. It put him on the map, and everybody knew who Francis Bacon was after that.
Interesting.
So for the listeners at home, I encourage you to look as well. I may even make it the cover of this episode.
These images are so weird.
They're truly freaky. And to us, maybe to a very contemporary audience in 2024, we might look at that and be like, oh yeah, I've seen many things like this on Tumblr and on whatever and in my own sketchbook journal. But, you know, you gotta think, this was fucking, you know, what year was this?
1944?
Yeah, in 1944, somebody putting out some scary ass shit like that, it was not heard of. It was improper, it was crazy, and it was new. So big oops, as they would say in England.
What the?
To Francis Bacon.
They're pretty big too. 37 by 29
big
inches.
Oops to Francis Bacon. You know the rules.
Did you hear what I said?
They're 37 by what?
29
centimeters or inches?
Inches.
Oh yeah, that is a pretty significant piece.
Interesting.
So this piece was vivid, scary, and disturbing, featuring themes of body horror, death, and a contorted series of inhuman figures. Frankly, it scared people.
Death? Really?
I mean, yeah, that's like kind of an over... I don't know exactly what the artist statement for this piece exactly was, but this was...
Oh, the base of the crucifixion.
But yeah, people looked at Francis's paintings and fell to death, you know, kind of just dripping off of them. They just felt like death paintings.
They look phallic, too. At least the middle one does.
Can I see? Yeah, that definitely does look fairly... I mean, they all really look kind of phallic.
Yeah, I guess they do. This one kind of... Well, no, it does. You're right.
Yeah. So, frankly, it scared people. For a post-war conservative audience, this art was disturbing and easily rejected. But for the disaffected, Soho, clubgoers, and artistic types, Francis was an immediate favorite. Everybody loved him. Like I said, the very conservative, rich, fancy audience hated him, but the young people and the gays and the theys loved Francis.
Okay.
So, socialite and art dealer Erica Brawson, who was a significant art dealer and Peggy Guggenheim type in London of the moment, took a very keen interest in Francis directly after meeting him, getting him to work right away.
What's her last name?
Brawson.
Brawson. Okay.
Brusen. So she signs on Francis into her roster of gallery artists. I don't really know how it works, but she sold she sold the Crucifixion famous piece, blah, 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 to the MoMA in 1946, just a year after that fucking show where it was displayed.
The chicken one? The first one?
No, the 3-figure triptych with the orange background was sold to the MoMA by her almost immediately. So she's a real fucking, she's a real art dealer. This is no small potato shit.
Yeah.
Erica seemed to care very deeply about Francis and tolerated all of his strange behavior and even helped support him financially out of her own pockets. Francis would often need money for his partying and gambling, and Erica saw to it that his paintings were sold. So they kind of ended up with a bit of a symbiosis where Francis would, he'd do his thing, they'd give him money, he would gamble and drink, and when the paintings were due, he gave them up. And they were to be sold.
Sounds like a decent life.
It was, for a time. Famously, Bacon and his old nanny would take frequent trips to Monaco, a Mediterranean island known for its casinos and partying. He spent years traveling to and from Monaco, so much that his art actually was suffering because he was always turning in paintings late and dropping the ball with upcoming shows. All money made from his art would go right back into the casino. Though he had a studio in London and a studio in Monaco, Francis gambled and partied full-time. By 1950, Bacon attempted to break away from the era of being... so I didn't really talk about this. I kind of fucked up the script a little bit. But one thing that Francis was running from throughout the whole beginning of his career was people constantly comparing him to Picasso and kind of feeling like he was a Picasso derivative or a clone, kind of like a Vanilla Ice Eminem situation.
That kind of sucks.
Yeah, so that kind of dogged him for a while. But by 1950, Bacon attempted to break away from the era of being compared to Picasso and making his own way. He decided it was time to paint from his own experience and paint the figure, paint real people in portraits. He made a series of paintings called The Heads, which were these horrifying, dark images of distorted animal-like people. So Francis kind of hit a wall. He's like, you know what, I'm going to be my own fucking art. I'm going to be my own dude. I'm going to make my own fucking legacy. Fuck Picasso and his stupid fucking shitty art, and I'm making my own cool stuff. By this time, Francis developed a relationship with another artist, a man named Dennis Miller. The two loved each other and were very close, but their relationship was described as stormy. They would often get into real fist fights in public on a regular basis. At galleries, bars, casinos, and parties, Bacon and Miller were known to scream, punch, and throw bottles at each other. You name it. But in the end, they would always be back together and in love.
Yikes.
Some people feel as though they were competing with each other with their art and having a bit of a professional jealousy pissing contest as they painted similar subjects and from similar influences. One such being a photographer named, I have no fucking idea how to pronounce this, but I think it's Edward Muybridge. A man who is a very famous photographer. You'll know him. He's the guy that invented sequential photography and is said to, he basically invented video. He was the first guy to put streams of sequential photos together to make a kind of primitive animation.
Is he the guy who did the horse thing?
Exactly. This is the guy that did the horse thing.
Okay.
So Francis Bacon and his homie loved this guy and painted from they had a book of his photos that they would just paint their own pictures from.
Cool.
They were sets of photos that seemed to resemble a comic strip or a film reel. One such series being by Edward was a series of nude male athletes wrestling, boxing, and fighting, and they were very homoerotic and spicy, and Francis... What the fuck was that? I lost my place. Francis saw an advantage in painting from these photographs because he had very little training in real studio drawing, and he found these ones easy to draw from because the figures were muscular and nude. These photos are where some of Francis's most famous works come from, depicting gay love.
Oh.
Francis paired erotic themes from his own life with a scary, morbid aesthetic, suggesting a disturbing association in his own mind.
That's cool.
So the nude athletes weren't actually sex photos, but through his own lens and aesthetics and experiences, he interpreted them as such in his paintings.
Yeah.
Francis's next major lover was a former Spitfire pilot, which means that he was the type of a World War II pilot that would be in plane fights in the skies with Japanese kamikazes.
Oh, wow.
That would, kamikaze, I don't know, I think kamikaze actually might be referring to a very specific act of suicide bombing, but, so I think I completely, whatever, fuck it, doesn't matter. I don't know anything about World War II history. Francis...
That's pretty intense, though. That's crazy.
Yeah, so Peter was a, James Dean, handsome, veteran, tough guy.
Wow.
Anyway.
He had some unprocessed trauma, probably.
Oh, yeah. Lacey was a handsome, wartime-looking guy with a nice haircut. He played the piano, sang, and Francis was wildly in love with him. Despite this charm and his good looks, associates of Peter and Francis describe him as being one of the most sadistic people they had ever met. Peter suffered from PTSD and was prone to fits of extreme violence. Francis fell victim to some of these attacks. Bizarrely, Bacon enjoyed getting beaten and abused by Lacey and would encourage him to attack him more.
Oh.
So Lacey was regularly abusing and beating Francis, but Francis, as we discussed earlier, had a very bizarre and weird relationship with this kind of behavior and taunted him and would make him and wanted him to do it more.
That sucks.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a fucked up situation.
Sounds pretty fucked up, yeah.
Yeah. You can say that again. He didn't have any home support either because, unfortunately, the nanny that he was living with earlier in the story passed away in 1951, leaving Bacon's home empty.
That's sad.
After her death, Francis's household fell into disrepair and chaos. Francis was unmoored and lost.
I want to know more about that character and his story.
Yeah, I saw photos of her, and she was like this tiny little old lady with glasses.
It sounds like she was like a mother to him, because his mother wasn't so great.
Yeah, his parents weren't so great, and it's kind of interesting to think that she would have left the employ of these people and just went and found Francis as like a 30-year-old man. Like, it's just like, how did they... that was details that I couldn't really find. There's like countless books and official information about Francis's life, so I'm sure perhaps like his furniture and stuff and the interior design, I'm sure it's very well documented, but I didn't
Maybe he
find
sought her out.
Perhaps he did, yeah. One of the worst events with Peter came when he and Francis One of the worst events with Peter came when he threw Francis through a plate glass window on the second floor of his house.
Oh my god.
Of Peter's house. Francis, landing in a garden, he had damage to his face and his eye, and he was bleeding. Apparently, this brought Francis closer to Lacey. Many of Francis's most haunting and scary paintings of evil, fucked-up-looking men are actually portraits of Lacey. Wow. Francis would paint terrifying, ghastly portraits of his lover. So
that's bad.
Yeah. Like many other artists coming up in the 50s, Francis was swimming against the tide of abstract expressionism and the explosion of the American art post-war shit. But bit by bit and little by little, Francis was building a large network of collectors and admirers all over the world. His legend was growing. By this time, thank God, Francis, his relationship with Peter Lacey started to wane and fizzle out. Bacon's career was growing and he was doing better as he set his eyes on larger galleries like the Marlborough Gallery in London, which I think if you were from London, that would really be like, whoa, he's working with them? Like, that's crazy. That's a serious gallery. Mm. But we don't know anything about that.
Sounds cool, though.
Yeah, he got in with them, and they bankrolled his gambling and party lifestyle without any hesitation. Art dealer Valerie Beston became Francis's handler from the gallery and served his every need. They say Valerie loved him and was there for him at every turn. The Marlborough Gallery was a large corporate entity with locations all over Europe. They saw Francis as their golden goose if marketed properly, so they were really, really trying to fine-tune this relationship, so they all made as much money as possible. They even got him a show at the Tate Gallery in 1962, and it was actually the Tate's first ever artist retrospective.
Wow.
Yeah, it was Francis Bacon.
That's wild.
Yeah, this show made Francis into a true fucking serious titan of the art world, but unfortunately, it was also the day his tumultuous and toxic love affair with Peter Lacey would come to a true end, as Peter Lacey would die on the day of the reception and celebration.
Oh my god.
Francis believed without evidence, and he said this publicly, that Lacey had killed himself on the day of the show as a way to sabatage Francis's happiness and success.
I was gonna say, like, what a, abuser move to die on the day of your opening.
Yeah, I think I definitely knew this when I was writing this because I wrote the script fucking 2 months ago or something.
Yeah.
But I think that his death was not officially a suicide, but everyone thinks it was.
What was the cause of death?
I don't remember.
What's his name again? Lacey? What's his first name?
Peter Lacey.
Peter Lacey.
Yeah, look up. He should come up. He might come up as a model. It might say art model Peter Lacey. Any luck?
Hold on. Typing. As Bacon later put it, his pancreas had exploded. He drank more than a person can drink and stay alive.
Anyway, okay, shut it off. You're going to spoil the story. Get off your phone.
It's unclear whether it was an accidental... Go ahead, keep reading.
What did you just see? Tell me.
Nothing. I'm not sure. I don't want to look up the context because I don't know if it's a spoiler.
You jerk. You jerk.
I don't know. I don't know.
I love you.
He drank too much, it seems.
What did you see?
He drank too much.
Why are you lying?
I'm not lying.
You have such a liar's voice. What did you see?
I can't say because it might be a spoiler.
Is it about Peter Lacey?
It didn't say who it was about, but it was an article about Lacey and Bacon. It was just in the Google description of the article.
Okay, well, Lacey isn't really the whole point of the story. Anyway.
Lacey sucks. Fuck Lacey.
Yeah, it is pretty fucked up, but yeah, so...
He sounds pretty awful and terrible.
Yeah, he also isn't, like, that's kind of the end of his arc.
Well, he died, so...
So he did, in fact, die.
Makes sense.
Later on, Francis received help and PR guidance. This is actually a really fascinating story to me. I mean, a part of the story to me, and is potentially the reason that Francis Bacon is as famous as he is.
Wow.
He developed a close friendship and PR relationship with BBC reporter David Sylvester, who, obviously, if you don't know, BBC is the NPR of England. And David Sylvester at the time was like fucking Charlie Rose or Larry King, where he was like a daily TV interviewer that, you know, he like everybody knew who this guy was and watched him on the TV all the time.
Yeah.
So he just became homies with Francis and would have him on his show constantly just to talk about art. So Francis became something of a muse for the journalist Sylvester. He conducted many film interviews with Bacon that were widely viewed and said to have inspired many young artists of the time. Sylvester would even go on to publish a book of interviews with Bacon. It's said that together they made a manifesto of Francis's work through the interviews. It could be said that Sylvester, in his prolific media making, is the reason we know so much about Francis.
Wow.
So, yeah, this guy just went buck wild, fucking interviewing Francis Bacon over and over again, and basically immortalized his story and all of his everything.
The power of journalism.
The power of fucking journalism. That's right. And not just journalism and, like, with a capital J, but just free-flowing interviews.
Documentation.
Where you're just fucking chilling and talking to a person.
Yeah.
The best kind of journalism.
I know we advocate for this all the time, and we are obviously biased, but to the listener, one of the most powerful friends you can make is a writer or a journalist.
Yeah, it is a bit biased, isn't it? Am I bothering your legs?
No. Well...
Okay. I can move them for a little bit.
No.
But I'm going to put them back soon.
I like that you're doing that. They're just...
Yeah, all right.
My leg's falling asleep.
So, eventually Francis found himself in a new, tricked-out art studio in the, what is known as the Rees Mews area of Kensington. This is where the famous photographs of his crazy, horrible, messy studio come from, if you've ever seen that. Francis Bacon's famous fucking shithole studio, of which there is a replica in a museum of his studio. It was so crazy. You know what I'm talking about?
We were tagged in an Instagram post about this today, actually.
Really? That's what that was about?
I think so. It was,
well, let's talk about that off air, just in case it's like, I don't know. Is it weird?
I don't know.
Anyway, whatever. Okay, Okay, despite all of his success, rising fame, and newfound big old affluence, Francis was still not satisfied with the artistic level he'd achieved. Francis wanted more. Like a true capitalist. Infinite growth. Anyway, okay. How are you going to trap reality, says Francis. How are you going to trap appearance without making an illustration of it? And that is one of the great fights and one of the great excitements of being a figurative artist today. Francis seemed to only paint and was obviously very attracted to the male figure, though he loved women as well, but in a very different way. In all aspects of his life, he pursued sex, thrill, and violence, but in his home, and for a sense of family, he depended on the women friends that he had. A close friend of his, Nadine Haim, who we heard a quote from very early in the script, says, "It was a friendship where we were in love. A form of love, that's for sure, but he never painted me." The few women he did paint included Muriel Belcher, tough, crazy owner of the Colony Room, who we discussed earlier, who was his, like, tough girl drinking buddy. Also, Isabel Rawthorne, who was a tall and strong woman, plus another Henrietta Moraes, who was also a large and strong woman physically. It's almost as if Francis was not just inspired by men, but instead by strength, size, and masculinity. Henrietta and not in a way that he was like a tough guy meathead, but that's what he liked.
Yeah. Aesthetically.
That's an important nuance, obviously. Henrietta and Francis related on the grounds of escaping religious trauma, as Francis was abused by his religious parents, and Henrietta was a former nun who became a central figure of the Soho party scene.
Wow.
Yeah, weird, huh? She'd probably be an interesting subject to talk about.
Yeah.
In Francis, we see a man painting pain, lovers, and close friends. Francis says, when you are painting anything, you are not only painting the subject, you are painting yourself, as well as the object you are trying to record. Marianne Faithfull, an old friend of Francis's, describes his relationship to drugs and alcohol. He wasn't much for the hard stuff, but he hit the sauce hella hard for many years. He was very...
You wrote that in the script?
I did, yeah. She didn't say that, I did. He was very, very sympathetic to drug addicts, though, as she recalls. Francis would, so Marianne Faithfull is a recovering addict. Francis would find her sitting on the wall in Soho, homeless and strung out, and he would pick her up and hang out with her and bring her out to eat at diners and shit. And she says that he never once judged her or tried to get her to change. He just hung out with her and made her feel like a real person.
Oh.
Oddly, this woman, this is kind of like a random weird connection. Her great uncle was a man named Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, who is an erotic author actually I learned a bit more about it. This guy is a evil, deviant sex freak from the 1800s and the namesake of the term masochism.
Oh.
I learned a bit about him recently.
That's her great-great-grandfather?
Yeah, which is kind of interesting that he had this like kind of sweet relationship where he helped this woman, and her great-great-great-grandfather or great-grandfather or something was the...
He's like the heir to the legacy of masochism?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the guy helping her out is a very famous masochist.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, we don't have to get in... whatever. And the reason that I brought that up, Francis was very familiar with and fascinated by this author, so they talked at length about this guy in Marianne's family history. So Francis was also very excited by that fun fact. As Francis's Soho friends enjoyed the nightlife and parties of 1960s London, Francis is said to have enjoyed a different type of nightlife, invisible to his friends, but right there in front of them all the same. I'm afraid of violence, says Francis, but I've often submitted to it. He would often turn up the next morning after a night of partying, bloody and bruised and injured. His friends eventually stopped asking what happened, as it happened so often and he would never really answer. Francis was often banged up and even missing a lot of teeth from injuries.
Wow.
So basically, what's in between the lines there is... actually, I'll keep reading. Once, Valerie Beston, the gallerist, or handler or whatever, called his doctor to the studio for an emergency where Francis's forehead was completely split open. The doctor told him he needed to see a plastic surgeon, but Francis demanded the doctor stitch him up right then and there without the plastic surgeon. He didn't give a fuck. They tried to give him local anesthetic, but he refused. The doctor said it seemed like he enjoyed the pain from the procedure.
Wow.
Yeah, friends say...
They didn't make him take the anesthetic?
Dude,
you can just say no?
I mean, he's the boss. He's like... And it's in his fucking house. And this is all a group of people that are kind of like in his employ. You know what I mean? Like, he's not...
But as a doctor, you would just...
Yeah, but it's his doctor on this guy's payroll in his fucking house.
Isn't that
and
like
Francis
a violation
rich.
of like a Hippocratic Oath or something? To just stitch someone up with no fucking...
I don't know if they have that in England.
Hippocratic Oath?
I don't fucking know.
No, sounds like it probably came from England.
Yeah, it sounds like something they made up. Those fucking assholes. Not because of the Hippocratic Oath, just in general.
Fuck the Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah, fuck them. Fuck the hypocrites. Okay.
Oh my god.
Okay, so, yeah.
Wow, that's fucked up, though. Damn.
Basically, as an explanation, friends say that Francis was intentionally going into seedy, crime-filled places and intentionally getting into fights or provoking beatings from street thugs onto himself.
I feel bad for him.
Yeah.
Like, that... It makes a lot of sense why he's doing that, given the backstory that we know.
Yeah.
But it's sad.
It is. It truly is. Hold on 1 second.
What's wrong?
Nothing. I just I mean, yeah, an hour and 13. Okay, we're back.
How?
An hour and 13. There's like 3 pages left.
Okay.
Yeah, there's exactly 3 pages.
Cool.
Or 4.
Cool.
3.
Cool.
Okay, so speaking of street thugs and ruffians and tough guys,
Yeah.
Francis's new guy, George Dyer, starts hanging around and began a spicy love affair with Francis.
You've used the word spicy twice in the script.
You know what's funny is I didn't even write spicy into that line. I just added it in, improvised. I just freestyled that one. George was a big, tough guy and a boxer. Dyer was called by friends of Bacon as an East End thug who was associated with London gang members known as the Cray Twins, 2 identical twin brothers who were notorious gang members. They were like... These guys are a super fascinating piece of London history because they were... there's actually a show about them, I think, starring the fucking guy from Venom.
What?
What's his name? The guy from Venom, Eddie Bravo.
The
guy who plays Venom. You know that? You don't remember Venom movies?
I remember the Venom movies, but I don't remember.
You know that actor, the British guy who's like in everything?
Google who?
You Google things so weirdly.
Tom Hardy?
Yeah, Tom Hardy. Anyway, whatever. Never mind. But yeah, so basically, All right.
Do you know that Woody Harrelson plays Carnage?
Who the fuck is Carnage? I don't know shit about superheroes. Fuck off. Sorry.
Well, it was really funny, since
Okay,
you apparently
okay.
know everything about the Venom franchise.
Right. Anyway, so George is a tough guy street criminal who has ties to who you can think of as like Whitey Bulger types of London.
Wait, why were you talking about Tom Hardy?
Because there's a famous show on TV where he plays these characters.
Oh.
He plays the 2 identical twins
What's
as
the
a
show?
double role. I don't know.
Peaky Blinders?
It's not Peaky Blinders, but it's like that probably. Anyway. And it's actually believed that these 2 famous criminals actually bought a painting off Francis Bacon once.
Wow.
So, yeah, they
Believe? They don't know what happened to it?
they were like, I think they bought a painting, but there was also times where they were seen coming and going from his area, his house. They were known as thugs, killers, and all-around ultra-dangerous dudes. Blah, blah, blah. Despite this gang-affiliated bad boy background, some strain in their relationship came from George being actually too gentle and too kind.
Oh.
While Francis pressured him to be rough and violent and sadistic. It seems clear to me that Francis was actually abusing George in some ways, unfortunately. Francis put unfair and crazy expectations on George and tried to emasculate him all the time. While Francis was painting countless portraits of George as a scary, tough-looking hunk murderer guy. To Francis, George looked the part for the type of violent, abusive guy he was looking for, but George wasn't that guy in his heart. He wanted to be a regular boyfriend, but Francis was looking for, a menacing bad guy to beat him up and hurt him.
Yeah.
So it was really toxic, and Francis was also, I think, pretty significantly older than George too.
Ooh.
So this isn't really a great look for Francis right now.
That's kind of bad. Yeah.
Yeah, George is going to play a pretty big arc in the end of the story. So.
Oh, poor George.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
So the paintings Francis made of George also suggested a macabre theme where parts of his face would be removed, bloody, disfigured. George is said to have been put off and made uneasy by these paintings, all the while watching curators, patrons, and gallery attendees consume them with awe and reverence. This appalled George. He said, I think they're this was actually typed in his accent. I think they're horrible. They're really horrible.
You typed that?
And he thinks I look like that. And these people go and pay thousands of fucking pounds for them. No, where I copy and pasted it from, they typed it like they wrote horrible with no H. I forget where I even sourced that. Sorry, everybody.
It's okay.
But yes.
I liked your impression.
They're
That's
fucking
good.
horrible. Anyway, after some time, their relationship was failing. The 2 of them would have blowout fights in Francis's studio where George would smash furniture and throw things and they would attack each other. Eventually, Francis grew weary of him and saw him less and less. Francis even started painting less portraits of him. Regardless of the chaos, Francis maintained his art career and his great ambitions. Francis was also offered a massive show at the Grand Palais in Paris, spelled Palais. A-I-S. Anyway, in Paris, being the first English painter to ever be displayed there.
Wow.
This was no small gallery show either. This was to be the biggest, most prestigious show of Francis's entire motherfucking career. It was a huge, huge deal. It was at this moment... What's wrong?
I just got nervous. I wasn't recording.
Yeah, it was at this moment he truly... I've said this 3 times now. He became a true... Like, this was like another, like, real fucking level up where he's now on a global stage.
That's crazy.
Of art.
How old is he now? In his 50s?
Yeah, I think so. This is in the 50s, so I think...
So he's 40.
Yeah, he's in his 40s. Anyway, regardless... So yeah, this is like a fucking massive, fucking crazy, crazy show. He had officially entered art history.
Wow.
He brought his whole squad with him to Paris for the opening, and including George in the entourage. George and Francis shared a room, while the rest of the group stayed in separate rooms. The first night there, Francis went upstairs and found George in a mess of drugs and booze with a young male sex worker. Disgusted, Francis left him in the hotel room and went out drinking at the casino with the rest of the group. The group got home around 2 a.m. Francis went back to George's room, but then decided to sleep in another room because he said it smelled awful in there. The next morning, Valerie Beston and another member of the group went in to check on George. The young sex worker was gone and the room was silent. They checked the bathroom, and unfortunately, they found George Beston dead on the toilet.
Oh, wow.
This was very, very bad, as the big gallery opening was to be the same day. So,
Again?
Yeah, he had 2 boyfriends die on the day of a major reception.
Wow.
But this was going to be different.
That's awful.
Knowing this would absolutely fucking ruin the event, Valerie, the gallerist, a representative of the Marlborough Gallery, and supporter of Bacon's career, cleared the room, got everybody's story straight, and arranged for the body to be found by hotel staff 2 days later.
Wow.
Yeah. Francis and the group everybody knew George was dead, and they left him up there for the duration of the Paris trip and the Grand Palais show.
Wait, Francis knew too?
Everybody knew, yeah. Francis was a part of this conspiracy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they just let him fucking rot up there?
They let him fucking rot up there for 2 days. They say it was a joint decision between Francis, Valerie, and the hotel manager. Even the fucking hotel knew. It is believed that George committed suicide, though this is not on his death certificate.
Wow.
At the opening, Francis is seen posing with his paintings, sharing drinks, and speaking with attendees, all the while looking pale, clammy, sweaty, and completely fucking dead and horrified in his eyes. News leaked of George's death during the opening. It ended up getting out anyway.
Someone said something?
Someone did, and everyone attending heard the news. Francis had to pretend in front of all of the guests that he was hearing the news for the first time. A narrative emerged that he was brave and strong and persevering for going forward with the show anyway, despite the death of his partner. But of course, he knew for 2 days prior, or for multiple days prior, that George was in the hotel room dead. So I think I actually messed up the timeline a little bit. I think that it was like a kind of like, oh, the show's tomorrow night, or something like that. It was something like that. So, creepily, the French state actually purchased a massive triptych painting from the show, and it was a painting of George posing nude on a toilet, which was among the many paintings in the show that George sat for.
Wow.
The president of France was so taken by this specific painting that he stood in front of it, admiring it for a long time before calling Francis over to talk to him about it. Francis had to act natural and discuss this piece of his dead boyfriend on a toilet, just as he was in the hotel room dead, with the president of France.
That's insane.
Just knowing that he was it's just the most fucked up scenario you can imagine.
He kind of deserved that.
He kind of fucking did. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, so that's a fucking crazy story, dude.
I don't understand what the thought process was, that it would have ruined the show if everyone knew he had died.
I mean, it was a quite a bit of scandal. I mean,
wouldn't that have made it a better show?
What does that say about Francis? Is if his boyfriend's, fucking dead in a hotel room from drugs with a male prostitute, like the day before his fancy show? I mean, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying I could see their motive.
But wouldn't it have been a better move to cover up the cause of death rather than the death itself?
Sure, but I mean, they probably didn't have the power to control the police or anything. If they had called the police and this and that, like they may have gotten out of their hands. I think they thought the way it was left, they could control the story.
That's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
It was a suicide, they think?
Everyone that knew him and was there seems to agree that it was a suicide. But that was not what was recorded. It was like a drug overdose or something. Oh. They think he overdosed intentionally.
Wow.
In taking his own life.
How old was he? You said he was very young. Was he in his 20s?
You'd have to look it up. You can look it up right now if you want. His name's George Dyer. Dyer. And he should come up as an art model, which is kind of interesting. George Dyer.
Oh, there's pictures of him.
How old was he?
1934 to 1971. What is that?
40s. $37. Shit. So a young man by for all intents and purposes. Okay.
And Francis Bacon was 62.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not exactly the most inappropriate, but it's maybe not great.
37 and 62?
I think it's weird, but I would put that in the range of, like, appropriate at the very least.
Yeah, but...
I mean, it's like after, like, 30, you're almost 40, it's like, you can... Age ranges upward kind of matter a little less than, like, a 20-year-old and a 50-year-old or something.
Yeah.
Anywho. That's not really a discussion worth dying over. That's not a hill I'm really interested in. Anyway, so Francis says, it seems a bit mad painting portraits of dead people. After all, if their flesh has rotted away, once they're dead, you have your memory of them, but you haven't got them. After the show, Francis traveled back to Paris to relive and reflect on George's passing. He went and stayed in the same hotel. This trip inspired Francis to paint some of the freakiest, creepiest pieces he ever made, which was a series of dark black paintings of George's corpse on a toilet.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so Francis was not over this. Friends believed this was him trying to process George's death. After the Paris show, and these paintings... after the Paris show and these paintings of George's corpse, demand for Francis's work skyrocketed. And began receiving even more international attention. His work even inspired films by notable directors of the day, one such being a movie called Last Tango in Paris, featuring Marlon Brando, being inspired by George's death in Paris. Are you looking up the painting or something?
Yeah.
I don't know what you would... I didn't include any titles of that painting.
Ooh.
Let me look. Yeah, so pretty disturbing, to say the least.
Yeah. This was also a triptych.
Yeah.
Dying on the toilet.
It's horrifying. That fucking sucks, man.
What a sad... considering George didn't even like these paintings either.
He did not seem happy with the way that he was being depicted at all.
To be remembered that way is so sad.
Yeah.
He memorialized him with more paintings of his death.
Yeah. Huh. All right, we're in the home stretch. Ready?
Okay.
As Francis aged, he became very insecure about his looks and physical appearance, but even still, he frequented gay clubs and casinos all the same. He met a young man named John Edwards. Despite their considerable age gap, they became inseparable. Francis's studio time became stressful and paranoid in his later years. In the old days, he used to be able to throw away paintings that he didn't like, but people at this time started stalking him and going through his trash, so he had to hire people to cut up and incinerate works for him. Like many rich and psychotic older artists, Francis Bacon's studio was crawling with random people looking to party or to rip him off. Because of this dynamic, Francis's team didn't really trust John Edwards, Francis's new boyfriend. Despite this apprehension, Francis had him connected to all of his bank accounts, resources, and John even knew where Francis kept all of his money. Francis loved John so much that he made his will almost solely dedicated to John.
Wow.
As Bacon aged, he fell sick. He felt sick watching 1980 Soho fade into a shell of what it once was. Like many great cities, the landscape changed, clubs closed, people died, and new businesses moved in. So his stomping grounds and his, wild, crazy club scene party area was kind of turning into a shitty corporate shell of what it once was.
Yeah.
Strangely, John, Francis's new boyfriend, also had he had a boyfriend as well. They were kind of polyamorous, it seems, named Philip, that he had been with for 6 years before meeting Francis, but continued dating him anyway. And as him and Francis's relationship bloomed, he was part of sort of a polycule. Francis met, during this time, a man named Jose Capello at a dinner party hosted by Francis's associates and neighbor. The two hit it off, and the two began to travel together, with Francis painting many portraits of young Jose. This ended up causing something of a feud between John and Jose, as Francis began sharing a safety deposit box with Jose, and Jose would not share the contents or the keys with anybody. Jose was very closed off and would not answer any personal questions, so nobody in Francis's team really knew a lot about him. After 2 years, Jose broke up with Francis abruptly. Despondent, Francis confided in friends that he had given Jose $4 million in 2 of his paintings.
Wow.
Jose left to Madrid with all of the money in the paintings.
Good for him.
I mean, he fucking ripped off poor Francis. Anyway, whatever.
Who knows what happened? Doesn't seem like Francis has a great track record in relationships.
That's true. He had been known to beat people up, and he...
Also, isn't he in his, late 60s now? How young is young Jose? His, 68-year-old, abusive millionaire boyfriend gave him $4 million and he left.
Get the bag, Jose. As the years pass... So basically what we're looking at is kind of, the party day... The dog days are over. The party days.
Yeah.
The clubs are closed. We're sad. We're old. And it's not looking good. And we're getting ripped off by gold-digging twinks. Francis's life is in shambles.
Well...
So, as the years passed, Francis deteriorated. He saw many doctors, but his condition never improved. Desperate to see Jose, Francis, now 82 years old.
Holy shit.
Yeah. He made a trip to Spain to try...
So he was in his 80s when he did that?
Yeah.
And you feel bad for Francis?
Yeah, a little bit.
Why?
Anyway, alright. Because it's fucked up. I don't know. He thought he was in love with this guy, but he just stole all his money.
How old is Jose?
Hold on, stop. We're almost at the end of the script.
Okay.
We're almost at the end
Why
of the
can't I
script.
Google it?
Because we're at the end. There's one more paragraph.
Okay.
Okay. Desperate to see Jose, Francis, now 82 years old, made the trip to Spain to try to find Jose and make things right. His doctors and friends and his team all begged Francis not to go, but forever the gambler and the masochist, he went anyway, where he collapsed from a heart attack upon arriving and died alone in the hospital with no one at his bedside.
Wow.
In Spain, yeah. Today, Francis's paintings are seen as sort of religious, as they are, as if they are from the Renaissance, or if they were made in some dark castle by an evil wizard. But the reality of their conception was much simpler than that. They were made by a traumatized gay man from London who spent his days in a studio and his nights in the club, partying with friends, smiling and laughing and feeling something. So that's Francis Bacon. Mental illness, street fights, and hiding a dead body.
The very end of his story is kind of sad.
It's pretty fucking sad.
I didn't know he died alone in a hospital bed.
Desperate and heartbroken and trying to find his boyfriend in Spain and just dies.
I still don't know that he's innocent in that. Not enough information.
I don't think he's innocent and really... I mean, he's innocent in his childhood.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I mean, everything else when he... I mean, that's the thing, too. It's like when you're an adult, it doesn't matter how traumatized you are. The unfortunate part of mental illness and trauma is that you're responsible for your reaction to it. You know?
Yeah. So Jose was born in 1956.
So that would make him like in his 60s right now. Is that math? I don't even know.
He was 47 years younger than...
So how old was he?
Well, he was 82 and...
So minus 47?
35.
Oh, come on. That's
after when he died. He was probably like around 30 when that happened.
I don't think they... Yeah, whatever. Fuck it. I don't care. Yeah, it's not great. Francis was maybe Francis was maybe up to no good. Maybe he was, but we love him, and
paintings are incredible.
We're fascinated by his story. I mean, it is
sad. Like, I mean,
crazy.
I feel like we, as a people, kind of romanticize the idea of like leaving a traumatic situation and going into maybe another traumatic situation that's within your control, like drugs and alcohol and like toxic relationships and whatever. Like, it's all very like sexy and whirlwindy to live that way. But I think there's an assumption that comes with that, maybe not consciously, or maybe it is, that you're like die or something. But there's something, I mean, that's very sad, obviously, but it's also very sad when you don't, but you never process any of that, and then you are 80 and still have that lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, live fast, die hard is what that sounds like. It's honestly a fucking wonder that he didn't die young.
Yeah.
It's like, it doesn't even make sense that he lived to be 82.
Yeah. I mean, good for him, I guess. Good for the art world, but...
Yeah, I mean, he made some great... Yeah, it's like... These are the kind of stories that I love so much, because it's like the ones where it's like, oh, and they... it's better to burn out, to fade away, died young, or like... Or maybe someone who's like, oh, and he recovered and got sober despite... Like, those are like the stories we always tell.
Yeah.
But this guy was just a fucking psycho that did a bunch of fucked up shit and then died like 80 years later.
Yeah.
It's not unsimilar to Andy Warhol's story, actually.
Andy Warhol had I don't know. I feel like the whole factory thing, like, it just feels like he had more of a darkness.
Andy Warhol...
Like, I simultaneously see him as less culpable and more bad.
Oh, yeah. Like, Andy Warhol was like a fucking demonic puppet master. Like, he was like an evil, like, circus ringleader. But Francis was like more of a werewolf. Like, he was just... Like, I mean, if we're talking fantasy archetype kind of stuff, like, he was just a lone crazy guy. Like, he didn't like lord over subjects like Andy Warhol did. Andy Warhol had like a clan of minions.
But I also don't feel like he... Like, I genuinely don't know that Andy Warhol set out to cause harm to other people. I think he just didn't give a fuck.
He didn't give a flying fuck.
He didn't care if that happened.
Yeah.
He was ambivalent. But it seems like Francis Bacon was kind of... He was in so much pain on his own that he was inflicting pain on those around him. But I don't think that he... Like, that wasn't his goal. It was just his personality.
I think that he probably felt like the way he treated others was okay because that's how he got treated.
Yeah, he's more of like a conventional abuser versus a systemic abuser, like Andy Warhol.
Yeah, Andy Warhol.
As in created his own system of abuse.
Andy Warhol made like an abuse factory.
Yeah. He literally.
God, what a psycho.
And I think another thing about Warhol that maybe that's also in Francis Bacon's story, but a little bit less so. The thing about Warhol that's also creepy is that he had like a really weird like class consciousness thing going on.
Andy Warhol, yeah.
Like, he just intentionally fraternized with desperate poor people.
Yeah.
Knowing that he had wealth and power that they didn't have, so he could benefit from their being there and harvesting their creativity. That's like so... it's like four-dimensional, I guess, as far as systemic
right, it
abuse.
is. That's a good observation of him that you can see through his own writings and treatment of others that he was class conscious.
He weaponized class.
He was very aware of his status as a new money non-WASP.
Yeah.
Dealing with the filthy rich and dealing with the filthy poor. Like, he knew exactly where he was in that hierarchy, which made him creepy.
Yeah, because it's like, if you're that aware of it and thinking about it all the time and spending a lot of time intentionally with people that you're calling your friends and making art with that are poor, you would hope that it's like in a
like you're like a socialist or something.
Way. Yeah, not just like a predator, like a vampire.
Yeah, a literal vampire.
That's why I feel like
Druella, as he was called by Lou Reed and others.
Yeah, and it's like I don't think that he. Like, if you had to talk to one or two of them, I feel like I'd feel safer sitting at a table with Andy Warhol throughout the night. Mm. Like, he's probably not going to, like, punch you in the face or, like, do something fucked up. But hanging out with him long term, you know what you're getting with Francis Bacon, maybe. Yeah,
like, Francis Bacon might, like, bottle you or, like I don't know, do something.
But also, it doesn't sound like he did that to anybody except for people he was in toxic relationships with.
Right, yeah.
Like, you wouldn't want to be his boyfriend at all. But right. You could be a friend of his, and it didn't seem like he was seeking to cause harm in that way. Mm. He was just, like, a extremely toxic, like, tempest of a person.
A tempest of a person. That's a good way to put it.
Because it does sound like he had a lot of people who really loved him, also.
He did, yeah.
Which I don't think that's true for Andy Warhol.
Yeah, Andy had people that were obsessed with him, and people... So...
He had people who worshipped him, not who loved him.
You know what's funny? I feel like I feel this way about toxic masculinity in general and the experience of a lot of men in the world. But there's an Andy Warhol included, even though he was like a not a masculine guy. He was like a gay guy who was, whatever, wore wigs and makeup and shit.
Yeah.
But most broken men or wayward men don't have any friends or loved ones. They have accomplices. And enemies. They have opponents and accomplices.
Huh.
They don't have homies. They have people they do bad stuff with and people they do bad stuff to.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And, like, weirdly enough, Andy had that, unfortunately. Like, all of his homies and people that helped him, they weren't his fucking friend. They were just making money with him. They were, like, part of his clout team.
Yeah.
You know? I'm sure they loved him, and maybe... But I don't know that it didn't seem like he felt that way. They were, like, his goons.
Yeah. Again, though, part of this might be what we talked about on the Andy Warhol episode, where there is so much information that comes straight from Francis Bacon's mouth due to his relationship with that journalist.
Right, yeah.
Versus Andy Warhol's sort of a myth of the mist.
Though what's so fucking weird about him that I learned during that project was that he has written like fucking 30 books about his own life. He's written like shitloads of memoirs.
Oh, wow.
That are published that you can get them.
Oh.
But they're just not, nobody's fucking read them. I haven't read them. Nope, they're not popular at all. Maybe he's like a horrible writer or something.
Imagine if they just suck. We should read them.
But he does exist. You're right. He does exist in a cloud of myth and mystery. Despite that, he's like, what's like the myth and mystery is far more interesting than whatever's in those books.
It could be the medium. Like, who's going to read a whole book versus watch a YouTube video?
That's true. Francis Bacon was on the TV and radio, so that's why people were... And one thing, actually, too, that I didn't include in this is that part of Francis Bacon's quest in becoming a legitimate popular artist was actually meeting Andy Warhol and, like, getting over there, which he never did, I don't think. But he wanted to.
That would have been a crazy time.
They were contemporaries. All of this was taking place at the same time as the Silver Factory stuff.
Wow.
It's art so history.
Hard. Like, I feel like so much of art history jerks off the 50s so hard. Like,
we
50s through 80s.
Yeah.
It, like, makes me, like, annoyed. Like, whenever I hear of another artist from that time period, I'm like, shut the fuck up. Like, stop. But it's also, like, pretty sick to imagine all of these, like, titans of Western canon being in the same region at the same time.
It is. And I've been hearing this phrase thrown around recently, which is the idea of a represented artist that a lot of people are saying now. And they're referring to artists that have received, far, far more than enough coverage, like Andy Warhol or Picasso or Jackson Pollock. And I think it's interesting because while Andy Warhol and Francis Bacon I would consider represented artists, I do feel like they're misunderstood enough that they warranted my coverage at least. Like, I felt compelled to talk about them because I felt like what I learned from the research was not what I have learned through pop culture and just from people talking and this and that and art professors. Like, I felt like everybody had it all wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that people remember Francis Bacon just because the guy who made the creepy paintings, not any of this stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, his paintings are more famous than him, obviously. So.
Well, that's how it tends to go. But I think that's something that is important to point out. Well, maybe it isn't important to point out, but I'm going to point it out anyway. I am doing a project right now for one of my classes that's about, like, liberal arts perspectives and how you can write an analysis on a topic from many different perspectives based on your background and your concentrations and your interests. And looking at things through an art perspective, like a studio art perspective, means analyzing the work, analyzing the techniques, seeing how it fits into other artists at the same time period, other people working in the same, like, school of thought, other people working with the same medium. It's very technical. But looking at things from the lens of art history is more about how that piece fits into that chapter of time. And then looking at it through a lens of generalized history or biographical history is looking at that artist and their contributions and their reasoning for producing. And I think that what you're doing with these scripts is looking at their biographies versus from a studio art lens.
I mean, I feel like that's a lot more interesting because the paintings, you can just fucking look at them.
Yeah.
So
well, I mean, that's a simplification, I think.
That's the convenience of an image. But the stories, you can't. You know, we're not Tralfamadorians or whatever the fuck from Slaughterhouse-Five or something.
I will say that I think that it does take a trained eye to do art analysis in a way that has depth, but... Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, not that I celebrate myself as having some kind of trained eye, but... I mean, you know, I didn't want to be like a... You know, whatever. But, like, I do think that it's kind of... I think this is probably super fucking pretentious, but while anybody can get involved and learn about art history, and they should... Talking about art sometimes can feel similar to talking about politics in that if you've never really talked about it before, the things you're saying might not feel really like... You feel like completely stupid for voicing any opinion. Right, and like totally out of like talking out of your ass and having no idea what anything means. Yeah. So, but I mean, that's just the nature of talking about a new subject though. So, you shouldn't feel that way. If that resonates with you, don't. Yeah, that's stupid. This is all like, I mean, I don't know. Nobody says that type of thing about old people that love the Civil War. And old people that love the Civil War only know like 5 things about the Civil War. They don't know fucking everything about it. They just think it's cool. Nobody says that those people are fucking stupid. Well, I mean, not really. People, when you meet an old person that is like obsessed with the Civil War, you're not like, you don't really know about it. I'm gonna say that. You're like, you don't really. Like, you're not a real Prove it. Civil... Yeah, like, you're not, like, gonna check them. You're just gonna be like, oh, it's just, like, some dad that likes World War II books. Yeah. That's what we are with art history. We just like it and read about it. Or, like, I don't know, or, like, a little girl that knows everything in the fucking world about BTS. Yeah. It's like, you know, you don't have to be a fucking historian. You could just gotta like something and read about it. That's true. I feel like the Civil War one is a little bit more barbed, though. Like, if you start talking to someone and they just randomly start talking about the Civil War, it's like, whoa. Like, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean... Where are you going with that? You can pretty quickly tell what somebody's real opinions are based on their... Yeah, that would be... Yeah. It's a little more alarming if you just start talking about Picasso. You mean less alarming if you talk about Picasso? The Civil War is more alarming than Picasso as a general topic. Of course. But yeah, I agree. Well, hey, that was Francis Bacon. That's my last script. Did you feel good about that one? You seem to feel pretty confident. I feel better about that one than the other ones. Do you think it's because of practice or because of the script itself? Potentially both. I wrote that script before the E.D. Sedgwick one, too. Really? Yeah, isn't that weird? It's been sitting around for a while. Yeah, we just didn't get around to it. And the Aaliyah one, I just did in like a day. Do you have any others? I hope no one feels insulted by that, but I just felt called to make that one. It's not that
deserved a day's attention or anything. It just was that I just did it in a day.
It was a shorter story, too.
Unfortunately, yes. Woefully so, a shorter story.
Do you have more scripts? Or
Not currently.
Nice. Good job.
Cool. Well, any concluding thoughts about Francis Bacon?
I somehow never had the experience of having an art teacher tell me to look into Francis Bacon, which is kind of interesting. I had a similar experience with Frida Kahlo, where every art teacher I knew told me to look into her, and I read her diaries and stuff when I was in college, which I don't know if that's a gendered thing, or maybe your work is also way more similar to Bacon's, or at least it was at that time in your life.
Yeah, and I had no idea who he was, so...
I didn't know who he was either. I was going to say, I didn't know most of this.
At the same time, someone told me to look into Frida Kahlo, too. Because at the time, too, I was, properly obsessed with making paintings about disease and my chronic illness and stuff. And all that stuff, and medical stuff, and paintings like that, so... Which naturally isn't, if you're going to make paintings about that, if you are in the audience making paintings like that... You gotta look into Frida Kahlo to learn.
I want to write a script on her.
Because what's cool about Frida Kahlo is that she's supposedly a surrealist, a title that she denounces herself. But what she really is to me is a metaphysical painter. Which I feel like is a bit of a different nuance than the surrealist. Because the surrealists, like Salvador Dali, I'm sure he has some writing about his fucking art somewhere, but... By and large, he just was making cool shit. Which I respect. He just wanted to make some dope stuff, but Frida's paintings had a metaphysical narrative.
Yeah, that's true.
Which Dali's maybe did. I don't fucking know.
Hers also had more, religious... Not necessarily religious symbolism, but religious motifs and inspiration from Catholic art. Which I feel like surrealism isn't inherently related to religion.
That's a good point. Surrealism is like a very, it's kind of like abstract expressionism, where it's kind of almost like American occult, where it's very much like Eastern, American lens on Eastern philosophy, Stoicism. That's more of an abstract expressionism thing, which I feel like it's a little more tough guy-ish.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Joe Rogan of art history kind of shit.
Abstract expressionism?
Absolutely. It's Joe Rogan-y.
Yeah, I guess I agree with you.
Not even just because of Jackson Pollock. It was a man's intellectual movement. It was even though there were many abstract expressions women, the guys that were whatever.
Yeah. It was remembered that way. Those are the people that were popularized, but...
Right.
I feel like that's like saying jiu-jitsu is a men's sport. They're fucking loud about it, but...
Right. Yeah, or MMA, or cigars, or hunting, or whatever.
But, I think that a lot of the surrealists... Well, I guess I shouldn't blanket statement that, because I don't know what I'm talking about, but the ones that I've read about, a lot of them are kind of in the same school of thought as, Jungian philosophy. It was, analysis of the dream state and the subconscious.
Yeah, which I don't know why, but I associate Carl Jung, even though he has very influential and extremely interesting theories and writings. He's very much associated with red pill stuff online. A lot of those weirdo women hating YouTube podcasters will often cite Carl Jung in their culture war things.
That's interesting. I've never seen that.
It's really common. He's definitely he's one of the hits that they play. A few specifically that I have in mind, but that's not really.
What about him?
Well, a lot of people, I think that, I don't know why this is, but I think that it's because psychoanalysis or whatever the fuck is similar to it's more similar to tarot and astrology than it is science. It was scientific and they did make advancements, but it did have a lot of woo-woo, kind of just making stuff up and kind of doing a lot of non-science buffoonery, debauchery and roguery. And I think that people who are doing culture war and are trying to make up their own points for
it's malleable.
Yeah, Carl Jung would be is a really great guy to like the writings. You know, it's really, you know, it's like the Matrix. It doesn't matter what the fuck the Matrix means.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter why it was made. It's easy for these people to just warp the Matrix into what they want it to be.
That's super interesting.
So
maybe that would be a fun script for me to write.
Carl Jung? Mm. Yeah, he was a fucking psycho, wasn't he? Didn't he do a bunch of fucked up shit? He was a weirdo.
Carl Jung?
Yeah, I think he was totally a weirdo.
You talking about Freud?
No, they both were.
Really?
I'm pretty sure Carl Jung. I think if you do a script on Carl Jung, it might be a script like this one today. I think he did some weird shit. Maybe not bad stuff, but I think he did. Anyway,
it probably was weird because it was early psychology. But
if you do that, I will happily. I will be a happy, excited audience.
I studied him a lot in school, but I don't know that if there was anything super dark that I would have heard about it there.
I mean, from what I've
self-exploration kind of thing.
Then again, in a psychology class, I mean, they're not, you know, they're telling you about the relevant information for the class. Probably not like what the guy did in his free time. I don't know. My brain is I'm just on conversational autopilot.
You tired?
No. Well, sorry, I feel like I just was like, well, you know, I did it. I think I feel like I will actually do.
Oh no, I just paused because you just said the same thing back to me. I said that I probably wouldn't have learned it in that space if it was something like unrelated to the text and dark.
Oh, right, sorry.
So I was just processing what you said. Because I was like hearing it, expecting it to be a contrasting point, and then it wasn't, so I was just buffering for a second. But I agree with you. From what I remember from my studies, it wasn't like... I mean, there was like dream analysis and stuff like that, but I don't think Carl Jung is generally regarded as a like right-wing thing. Well, not... But I can see what you mean as far as the malleability.
I don't think that I don't know that in any way that he was right-wing or like that, but I think that people have used it as such. Whatever.
Yeah, people use all psychology that way.
Speaking of right-wing and surrealism shit, I think that I owe a debt to the podcast, and specifically to Salvador Dali, because a year or two ago, we just made a, like, blundering, factless episode called Was Salvador Dali a Fascist? And I, like, just, like, only referenced, like, one random article and didn't even write anything down.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it would be the classy thing to do a Salvador Dali script and actually legitimately answer that question.
I think that we did some deep research in the car while we were doing that, though.
Yeah.
Not that that's deep research.
We did a bit of Googling and came to some answers, but I think that I just think that was dumb. I need to fix that.
We could do a deeper dive just on his biography anyway. We didn't really cover who he actually is or what he does.
I'll cover that.
Okay.
You let me. I'll take care of our friend Mr. Sal Dali.
I want to write about Frida.
Sure.
I have a list of people that I've claimed that I want to write about.
That we'll never do an episode on.
Shut up.
Because you claimed them.
I've been in school.
I love you.
And I signed up for summer school today.
Oh, good for you. That's awesome.
I don't know how the FAFSA works for summer school at all.
I'm very happy for you. You'll do great.
Did you hear what I said?
That you don't know how the FAFSA works for summer school?
Yeah.
Well, neither do I. You're shit out of luck. I'm sorry. You must be stressed, happy?
I hate you.
You must be so... Are we bickering?
One of us is.
That lady's going to be so mad at us.
We failed. I mean, honestly, if that lady's still here, like if you listened to another episode and stayed till the end after we razzed the shit out of you, props, and we appreciate it.
I never hated you.
Well, then you're a bitch. What do you mean? You're just fine with that?
I'm just kidding. No, yeah, I don't know. I think it was one thing that she did say that I thought was kind of funny that reminded me of some old like a perspective that I feel like I forgot, where she said, I was wondering, or the comment was something like, oh, I was curious to know what an art podcast would be like, considering there's no visual element and you can't see what they're talking about, but I was pleasantly surprised by how it was.
I did appreciate that. I honed in on the...
Right, you honed in on the wrong... anyway, but I know, I love you, it doesn't matter. But I think that I remember thinking about that when I first listened to Talk Art, where I was like, wow, this is so novel. A art podcast with no images or video. This is so crazy. But, yeah, so I guess I kind of took for granted that kind of novelty. Also, not to toot my own horn. Wait, should I?
Do it. What?
No, actually, I should talk about that off air. Never mind.
What?
Nothing. It's just me just fantasizing and thinking.
What?
What? Why is that so? Why are you aghast?
What are you talking about?
I can't.
Just say it. Just say what you were going to say.
No.
You can't just secretly fantasize over there. What are you talking about?
I'm fantasizing right now. You can't stop me.
What are you talking about?
Anyway.
You're being a creep.
I didn't mean to be a creep. I was just using the word fantasize
I'm just
in a
kidding.
very generic way.
It's okay, I'm just kidding.
I'm just fucking thinking about some gnarly, creepy shit.
Stop.
I'm thinking about Francis Bacon. Anyway, all right. Let's wrap this one up. Exactly 2 hours.
2 hours? Wow.
I'll give them the cliffhanger, and I'll tell you what I was going to say. Sorry, assholes. Just kidding. You're not assholes. I love you. Okay, that's all.
Just say I love you.
I love you. I'm talking to the podcast, not you.
Not to the audience. The podcast.
I love you.
That was probably like a horrible earbud experience.
Yeah, I'm sorry about your earbuds, everybody. Sorry for the people who can afford AirPods. Bourgeois fucking... I'm just kidding.
Should we do a GoFundMe for us to get AirPods?
No. I don't think I'll ever have an GoFundMe.
Yeah. Well, God willing.
I would do a GoFundMe on someone else's behalf, but I don't want one for myself.
I've done that before.
Yeah, you kind of did. Anyway, all right. Thank you guys very much for listening. I hope you learned something about art history and art in the world. Thank you, Theo, for your commentary and analysis. God bless you.
Thank you.
God bless you. And
Sorry.
That's all. Boston Art Podcast. Shout out to any new listeners.
I'm sorry.
And that's a wrap.
Bye.
Boston Art Podcast is an independent DIY production by Brian Huntress and Theodora Earthworms. The information contained in this episode represents the views and opinions of the original creators or our guests, and does not represent any institution, organization, or business. Find us on Instagram at Boston Art Podcast, and tune in for a new episode every Friday. Thank you for listening.